They said the dog wasn't trained. He was unleashed. The Korean Mafia boss kept him close not as protection, but as a warning, a living consequence with jaws like iron clamps and eyes that never blinked. The attack dog had turned handlers into headlines. Men twice its size froze when it rose. It didn't bark. It calculated. And when it lunged, it didn't miss. Even the boss, a man feared across the city, never touched the leash himself. Some weapons weren't meant to be controlled, only aimed. Everyone in the room knew the rules. Don't run. Don't stare. Don't breathe too loudly. And whatever you did, don't cross the dog's path. The waitress followed all of them. Head down. Shoulders small. Moving through the room like furniture, seen, but never noticed. Just another black woman in an apron, carrying drinks for men who wouldn't remember her face. Until the dog turned. Until it charged. Until she leaned down and whispered one word. What she whispered wasn't loud. But it stopped the dog mid-lunge. If you're ready for a story about power, dignity, forbidden love, and the sweetest revenge you've ever witnessed, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this channel brings you the most addictive romance stories you won't find anywhere else. Drop a fire in the comments if you're team revenge. And let's get into this story. The boss arrived without ceremony, and yet the room bent around him like gravity had shifted. Baek Sang-go didn't announce himself. He never needed to. Conversations lowered on instinct. Laughter died halfway through breath. The music didn't stop, but it felt like it should have. He moved through the private lounge with the calm precision of a man who had never been challenged and never expected to be. His suit was immaculate, black on black, tailored so cleanly it looked poured onto him. Tattoos crept from beneath his cuffs and up his neck, inked reminders of wars already won. His face held no emotion. Not arrogance. Not anger. Just control. Cold, measured, absolute. But no one was watching him. They were watching the dog. The attack dog walked half a step behind Sang-go, massive shoulders rolling with each silent stride. A thick steel collar circled its neck, scarred and worn, not from restraint, but from impact. The animal's head stayed low, eyes scanning, calculating distances, memorizing exits. This wasn't a pet. It wasn't even security. It was enforcement. People whispered stories about it the way they whispered about executions. A handler who twitched too fast. A rival who reached into his jacket. A bodyguard who tripped and made the mistake of falling forward instead of back. 3 handlers fired. 2 hospitalized. 1 never worked around dogs again. The boss didn't give commands. He didn't need to. The dog didn't wait for them. Across the room, Alicia moved quietly between tables, balancing a tray that felt heavier with every step. She kept her eyes on the floor, not out of fear, but habit. You learned early which people wanted to be seen, and which wanted you to disappear. In places like this, waitresses weren't people. They were extensions of the room. Furniture that refilled glasses and absorbed insults without reaction. Her feet ached. Her back screamed. She'd worked a double the night before and picked up this shift anyway because rent didn't care about exhaustion. Neither did her brother's legal fees. The envelope taped to the inside of her locker played on a loop in her head, bold red numbers, a deadline circled twice, and a warning written in someone else's handwriting. Miss it, and the consequences wouldn't be financial. She adjusted her grip on the tray and kept moving. Hey! The floor manager hissed as she passed. Table 9. Her stomach tightened. You know who that is, right? He continued, not waiting for an answer. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't rush. And for the love of God, don't look at the dog. She nodded once. That was all she ever did. Nodding was safe. Nodding didn't draw attention. As she approached, the air itself felt different. Thicker. Charged. The dog noticed her immediately. Its head didn't turn, but its eyes did, locking onto her movement with unsettling focus. Alicia felt it like a pressure between her shoulder blades. She kept her posture neutral. No sudden movements. No hesitation. Fear was something animals tasted before blood. Around them, the room held its breath. One man at the bar subtly shifted his chair back. Another lifted his feet off the floor. A server froze mid-step, tray trembling in her hands. Everyone knew the rules. They'd learned them the hard way or watched someone else pay for breaking them. The dog didn't like unpredictability. Alicia slowed her pace as she reached the table, lowering the tray just enough to set down the first glass. Her hand didn't shake. Her face didn't change. Emotional restraint had been beaten into her by years of knowing that reactions could be weaponized against you. She placed the second drink. Then the third. Behind her, someone laughed too loudly. The dog's ears twitched. "Careful!" A voice whispered urgently from somewhere behind her. "Don't!" Alicia shifted her weight to turn. Her heel caught the edge of a slightly lifted rug, just enough. The tray tilted. For a fraction of a second, time stretched thin and brittle. Crystal slid against metal with a sound that scraped every nerve raw. Alicia's grip tightened instinctively, but momentum had already chosen its direction. The glass fell. It shattered on the marble floor with a sharp, explosive crack. Silence detonated across the room. Whiskey splashed upward, dark and amber, spraying across the dog's chest. The animal froze. Its body went rigid, muscles locking like coiled steel. The calculation in its eyes vanished, replaced by something older. Hotter. The sound that came from its throat wasn't a bark. It was a low, rising roar, vibrating through bone, through floor, through the pit of Alicia's stomach. No one moved. Not the guards. Not the staff. Not even the boss. The dog slowly turned its head. And locked eyes with her. In that instant, Alicia understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't about punishment. This was about instinct. And it had just found its target. The roar tore through the room like a physical force. Chairs scraped backward in panic. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered unnoticed. A woman near the bar let out a sharp, involuntary gasp before clamping her mouth shut, as if sound itself might provoke the animal further. The air went electric, thick with the unmistakable promise of violence. The dog lunged. One powerful step forward. Then another. Its claws struck marble with a wet, rhythmic certainty, muscles rippling beneath its dark coat as it closed the distance between instinct and impact. This was the moment everyone had seen before, when time didn't slow so much as fracture, when the body understood what the mind refused to accept. Alicia didn't run. Her heart slammed against her ribs, loud enough that she was sure the dog could hear it. Adrenaline surged, sharp and bitter in her throat, but her feet stayed planted. Running would trigger pursuit. Screaming would spike the animal's drive. Every nerve in her body begged her to do both, and she denied them. The dog was almost on her now. She could see the detail in its face, the flare of its nostrils, the tension in its jaw, the thin line of saliva stretching between its teeth as it inhaled. Each breath came fast, forceful, pulling in the scent of spilled alcohol, polished stone, fear. Especially fear. Fear soaked into the room like heat. From his seat, Bex Sango didn't move. He had seen this outcome enough times to know how it ended. There was no calculation left to make. The chain of cause and effect had already been set in motion. A mistake. A reaction. A correction paid for in flesh. He didn't look away, not because he enjoyed it, but because looking away was pointless. This was what the dog did. This was what he had been shaped to do. Blood was inevitable. Alicia felt the weight of that inevitability settle over her like gravity. The room, the people, the music, all of it fell away. There was only the animal and the space between them collapsing too fast. She dropped. Not backward. Not in a scramble. She lowered herself deliberately, knees hitting the floor with a dull thud that echoed in the silence. The impact sent a jolt up her spine, but she didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, shoulders rounding, chin dipping just enough to expose the vulnerable line of her neck. Submission. Not fear. Not weakness. A signal. The dog skidded to a stop inches from her. Its momentum carried its massive body forward, muscles straining as instinct fought restraint. Its jaws snapped shut on empty air, teeth clacking together with a sharp, violent sound that made several people recoil. Hot breath washed over Alicia's face, heavy and metallic. She could smell the animal now, leather, sweat, the faint copper tang of old blood embedded deep in its fur. The growl that rumbled from its chest was low and sustained, vibrating through her bones. A warning. A promise. Alicia kept her eyes down. Looking into a predator's eyes was a challenge. A mistake. She knew that. She focused instead on the rise and fall of the dog's chest, on the rhythm of its breathing, too fast, too shallow. Fight mode. Red zone. Her hands rested flat against the floor, fingers splayed, unmoving. She made herself smaller without curling inward. Still present. Still grounded. The room held its breath. No one intervened. No one dared. This was the moment where interference got people killed. Then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, Alicia spoke. One word. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It didn't cut through the air or demand attention. It slipped out of her like an exhale, carried on a low, steady tone that didn't match the chaos of the moment. The effect was immediate, and wrong. The dog's growl faltered. Just for a fraction of a second, the sound hitched, as if the animal itself had stumbled mid-thought. Its ears twitched, head tilting almost imperceptibly, confusion flickering across its features. The tension in its shoulders didn't disappear, but it shifted, rearranging itself into something less explosive. Less certain. Alicia whispered the word again. The dog's breathing slowed. Not by much. But enough to notice. Enough that the people watching felt the shift ripple through the room like a change in pressure. Someone swallowed loudly. Another person leaned forward, unable to look away now, even if they wanted to. The animal's weight shifted backward, claws scraping softly against the floor as it adjusted its stance. Its head lowered a fraction, nostrils flaring as it drew in Alicia's scent again. Sweat, fabric, something else underneath. Something familiar. The dog didn't retreat. It listened. Alicia's voice remained steady, threading through the tension with deliberate calm. She didn't repeat the word a third time. She let it hang there, giving the animal space to process it. To choose. Seconds stretched. The growl faded into a low, uncertain rumble before disappearing entirely. The dog's mouth closed. Its jaw unclenched. The rigid line of its spine softened, muscles no longer locked for impact but coiled in wary readiness instead. Slowly, almost reverently, the massive head dipped. The dog's nose brushed the floor. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "What the hell?" under their breath. Alicia exhaled for the first time since the glass had shattered, her breath shaky but controlled. She didn't move. Movement would break the spell. She waited, listening to the animal's breathing settle into a deeper, more measured rhythm. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. The dog sat. Not abruptly. Not obediently. Carefully, as if the decision itself carried weight. Silence crashed down around them, heavier than the roar had been. Sango stood. The scrape of his chair against the floor sounded unnaturally loud in the aftermath. His guards tensed instinctively, hands hovering near weapons, eyes darting between the boss and the dog. Sango ignored them. His gaze was locked on the scene unfolding in front of him. The dog, his dog, was calm. Not restrained. Not confused by pain or threat. Calm. And it wasn't looking at him. Its attention remained fixed on the woman kneeling on the floor, shoulders squared, hands steady, as if she were the only thing anchoring it to the present. Sango had given commands before. Short, sharp words that cut through noise and demanded response. The dog had followed them, mostly. Enough to be useful. Enough to be feared. But this was different. This wasn't obedience. It was recognition. For the first time since he'd acquired the animal, Sango felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Uncertainty. Because the dog hadn't stopped for him. It had stopped for her. The silence didn't break. It relocated. Whispers followed Alicia as she was escorted out of the lounge, not by guards gripping her arms, but by the weight of dozens of stairs pressing into her back. Some were stunned. Some were furious. Most were afraid. Fear didn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looked like resentment, sharp, quiet, and patient. The dog walked beside her. No leash. No command. Just presence. Its massive frame moved with an ease that hadn't been there before, head level, shoulders loose, eyes alert but no longer hunting. Every few steps, it glanced at her, not for direction, but for confirmation. Alicia felt it without turning. The awareness sat between her shoulder blades like a held breath. They passed through a private corridor lined with smoked glass and soft amber lighting. The sound of the lounge faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of a building designed to hide secrets. At the end of the hall, a door opened without a knock. "Leave us!" The voice was calm. Final. The guards hesitated for half a second, long enough to register their discomfort, then retreated. The door closed. The lock slid into place with a soft, definitive click. Alicia stood alone with Beck Sango and the dog. The office was sparse. Intentional. A long table of dark wood. 2 chairs. No art. No windows. Control didn't need decoration. Sango remained standing, jacket still immaculate, expression unreadable. He didn't ask her to sit. He didn't tell her to leave. He studied her. Not the way men in the lounge had, quick glances, dismissive, transactional. This was something else. Surgical. As if he were cataloging her piece by piece, rearranging a profile that no longer fit the narrative he'd assigned her minutes earlier. "You knew what to do," he said finally. It wasn't a question. Alicia kept her posture neutral, hands loose at her sides. Adrenaline still buzzed through her veins, but she didn't let it show. Panic was expensive. Control was survival. "I knew what not to do," she replied. Sango's eyes flicked to the dog, now seated calmly near the door. Waiting. "Everyone knows what not to do," he said. "They still fail." A beat. "You didn't." The dog shifted slightly, nails clicking softly against the floor. Alicia felt it before she saw it, the subtle lean toward her, the way its attention recalibrated when she breathed. She didn't acknowledge it. Not yet. "Why?" Sango asked. The question hung between them, heavy and sharp. Why had she risked it? Why hadn't she screamed? Why had the dog listened? Alicia chose her words carefully. "Because fear escalates fear." A lie. Or at least, not the whole truth. Sango accepted it anyway, or pretended to. He stepped closer, stopping just outside her personal space. Close enough that she could smell his cologne beneath the sterile scent of the room. Close enough that she could feel the power imbalance reassert itself. "You don't belong on the floor," he said quietly. "You don't move like staff. You don't react like prey." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a slim tablet, tapping the screen once before holding it up, not shoving it in her face, but presenting it. A photo flickered into view. Not recent. Grainy. Alicia in a different uniform. Different posture. Standing beside a dog that looked smaller but no less intense. Her jaw tightened involuntarily. "You disappeared," Sango continued. "No records. No goodbye. People like you don't vanish unless they are forced to." He lowered the tablet. "I don't care why you left," he said. "I care that you came back." Alicia didn't respond. Silence was safer than denial. "I'm offering you protection," Sango said. "From whatever pulled you underground. From whatever is waiting for you when this night ends." He glanced at the dog again. "In return, you stay. You keep him stable. Focused. Under control." The words were precise. Deliberate. Control. Alicia felt the trap close around her. Protection meant confinement. Stability meant responsibility. Staying meant losing the option to disappear again. This wasn't empowerment. It was a reshuffling of the cage. "And if I say no?" she asked. Sango didn't smile. He didn't threaten. He simply tilted his head slightly, considering her. "Then you walk out," he said. "And the world resumes its interest in you." The implication was clear. Interest could be violent. The dog rose to its feet and moved to her side. Not aggressively. Not protectively. Willingly. Alicia's breath caught despite herself. She hadn't commanded it. Hadn't signaled. The animal had chosen proximity. Around the edges of the room, the staff watching through tinted glass stiffened. Someone muttered under their breath. Another crossed their arms, jaw tight. Fear curdled into something else. Resentment. Sango noticed. Of course he did. They will hate you for this, he said calmly. People fear what they cannot control. And they fear it more when it chooses someone else. Alicia met his gaze for the first time. You're not afraid. No, he said. I'm curious. A long pause stretched between them. Have you done this before? He asked. Not this. Not the dog. Not tonight. Just this. Alicia's fingers twitched once at her side before she stilled them. Enough to know when it works, she said. Sango studied her a moment longer, then nodded once. A decision made. Very well, he said. You stay. The lock disengaged. As Alicia stepped back into the corridor, the dog followed without hesitation, its presence a silent declaration that didn't go unnoticed. Conversations died as she passed. Eyes tracked her movements. Fear sharpened into hostility. Somewhere far from the lounge, beyond the glass and steel and controlled violence, a man stood in the shadow of a parked car, watching the building's upper floors through a scope he hadn't used in months. He lowered it slowly. So that's where you ran, he murmured, and smiled. The estate didn't sleep. It only pretended to. From the outside, Sango's compound looked untouchable. Layers of steel, glass, and silence stacked into something that felt more like a monument than a home. Inside, it moved constantly. Cameras rotated with soft mechanical sighs. Guards shifted posts on schedules that never repeated. Every corridor carried the low hum of power held in reserve. Alicia felt it the moment she woke. The room she'd been given was immaculate, almost aggressively so. No personal touches. No signs anyone had ever stayed long enough to leave an imprint. She sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her palms together, listening to the faint echo of her own breathing. The dog lay on the floor near the door, massive body relaxed, eyes half-lidded but alert. He hadn't left her side. Not once. Word traveled fast in places like this. By morning, everyone knew. The staff avoided her gaze. Guards stiffened when she passed. One of the senior handlers refused to be in the same room as the dog anymore, muttering about bad luck and broken hierarchies. Control had shifted, and no one trusted where it had landed. Sango watched it all from a distance. He'd spent years building a system where loyalty was enforced through fear and clarity. Now a variable had been introduced, one he hadn't planned for and couldn't fully read. It wasn't the dog that unsettled him. It was the speed at which the balance had changed. The city noticed these things. So did people who made their living exploiting imbalance. Miles away, in a building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, Captain Marcus Hale stared at a paused video frame on his monitor. The footage wasn't supposed to exist. A private room. A shattered glass. A dog frozen mid-lunge. And a woman kneeling on the floor. Hale leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. To the public, he was a decorated officer with a reputation for cleaning up messes. To the right people, he was a fixer, a man who knew how to erase problems before they reached daylight. Alicia Munro had been one of those problems once. She didn't die, he murmured, irritation threading through his voice. That's inconvenient. He tapped a key, pulling up another file. Financial records. Court dates. A familiar last name jumped out at him. Her brother. Hale smiled thinly. Back at the estate, Alicia's phone vibrated for the first time since she'd arrived. No number. No name. Just a message. We need to talk. Her stomach dropped. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. A second message followed almost immediately, this one accompanied by a photo. A grainy image of her brother stepping out of his apartment building, head down, jacket pulled tight against the cold. Timestamped. Recent. The dog's head lifted, ears angling toward her as her pulse spiked. They found you, Alicia whispered, more to herself than to him. The pressure built quickly after that. Deliveries delayed. Permits stalled. A routine inspection turned aggressive. One of Sango's shell companies was suddenly under investigation, accounts frozen pending review. None of it was overt. All of it was coordinated. Sango recognized the pattern. Someone is testing the perimeter, he said later that night, standing at the edge of the security room as screens flickered with live feeds. Not gangs. Not rivals. Alicia stood beside him, arms folded tight. Law enforcement? Worse, Sango replied. People who pretend they are. Another vibration buzzed in her pocket. This time, the message came with a location pin. You have until tonight. Fears shifted shape inside her. It wasn't sharp panic. It was colder. Heavier. The kind that settled in your chest and refused to move. They want me gone, she said quietly. Sango turned to look at her. They already did. She met his gaze. They know about him. The dog, sensing the tension, moved closer, his shoulder brushing her leg. Sango followed her glance. Then he's a liability, Sango said flatly. The word hung there, ugly and unavoidable. Alicia's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video. Her brother sat in a chair under harsh fluorescent lights, wrists bound, face pale. Someone stood behind him, just out of frame. A hand rested casually on his shoulder, possessive, cruel. Hale's voice came through clear and calm. You made a very impressive mess last night, he said. Unfortunately, messes attract attention. And attention gets people hurt. The hand tightened. Alicia's breath itched. You're going to open the east gate, Hale continued. You're going to leave it open for exactly 3 minutes. Long enough for a problem to be solved. The camera tilted slightly, revealing a small syringe placed carefully on the table in front of her brother. And you're going to make sure the dog doesn't interfere. The video cut. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Sango didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low, controlled, but something dangerous moved beneath it. This is leverage, he said. They're using you to reach me. They're using him to reach me, Alicia replied, her voice barely steady. The dog pressed his head against her thigh, grounding, present. Unaware of how central he'd become to a war he couldn't see. If you don't comply, Sango said, they'll hurt your family. If I do, Alicia said, they'll kill you. The truth settled between them like a loaded weapon. Outside, the city pulsed on, unaware of the line being drawn through its heart. Somewhere in that sprawl, Captain Hale checked his watch and smiled. Alicia closed her eyes. The ultimatum was clear. Betray the man who protected her, or lose the only family she had left. And the clock had already started ticking. Alicia didn't sleep. She sat at the small desk in her room long after the estate had dimmed into its artificial night, phone face down, the echo of Captain Hale's voice looping in her head. Every instinct told her to plan alone. To run scenarios. To calculate survival the way she always had, quietly, without witnesses. Instead, she stood. The dog rose with her. They walked the corridor together, their footsteps swallowed by carpet and silence. Guards glanced up as she passed, hands twitching toward weapons, unsure whether to stop her or step aside. The dog decided for them. It moved forward with calm authority, and the path opened. Sango was in his study, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, standing before a wall of city lights that glittered like a map of everything he controlled. He didn't turn when she entered. He already knew. You're late, he said. I had a choice to make, Alicia replied. That made him turn. She didn't soften it. Didn't hedge. She held his gaze and placed her phone on the desk between them, sliding it forward. The screen lit up with the frozen image of her brother bound to a chair. This is who they really want, she said. And this is how they're going to get him. Sango watched the video in silence. No outburst. No denial. When it ended, he let the screen go dark and finally looked at her, not as a boss, not as a threat, but as a man weighing betrayal. They think you'll open the gate, he said. Yes. They think you'll neutralize the dog. Yes. And you came here to tell me. Yes. The pause that followed was razor thin. This was the moment where men like him decided who lived and who didn't. Alicia felt it settle in her bones. I won't do it, she said quietly. But I won't let my brother die either. Sango studied her face for cracks. Found none. Then, he said slowly, we give them exactly what they're expecting. He tapped a command into the console on his desk. Security feeds shifted. Gates. Timers. Sight lines. They want the dog out of the equation, he continued. So we put him where they'll never look. The plan unfolded without theatrics. No speeches. No promises. Just precision. Alicia knelt beside the dog as Sango spoke into his comms, issuing orders that sounded routine to anyone listening. Guards repositioned. Cameras went dark, then came back online on a delay. Outside the east gate, the city breathed. Alicia pressed her forehead lightly against the dog's. You remember the word, she whispered. This time, when she said it, it wasn't a command. It was a memory. The dog's body stilled, not with tension, but with focus. Its breathing synced to hers, deep and controlled. This was what the word had always meant. Not stop. Not obey. Stay with me. At precisely 11:58 p.m., the east gate slid open. Captain Hale and his men moved fast, confident, dressed in tactical black that carried the illusion of legitimacy. Their weapons were suppressed. Their cameras were off. To them, this was a cleanup. Hale smiled as he crossed the threshold. Too easy, he muttered. The lights came on. Not harsh floodlights, clean, surgical illumination. Cameras descended from the ceiling on articulated arms. Screens flickered to life along the courtyard walls, broadcasting live. Sango stepped forward into frame, calm as ever. You're trespassing, he said evenly. Hale's smile faltered. This doesn't concern you. Hale snapped, raising his weapon. Stand down. Alicia's voice cut through the air. Now. The dog moved. Not in a blur of violence, but with devastating precision. It didn't charge Hale. It flanked him, cutting off retreat, forcing him to turn, exactly where Sango wanted him. Guards closed in, weapons trained, cameras rolling. Captain Marcus Hale, Sango said. On record, explain why you're here. Hale lunged. The dog intercepted, slamming him to the ground with controlled force, pinning him without tearing flesh. The whispered word echoed again, calm and steady, and the dog held, muscles locked, restraint absolute. Hale screamed. Not in pain. In exposure. He ranted. Threatened. Confessed without realizing it, words spilling out as the weight of the moment crushed him. The feed streamed live. Phones across the city lit up. Authority fractured in real time. Alicia stood still, heart pounding, watching power drain from a man who had built his life on fear. When it was over, silence returned, different this time. Clean. Sirens wailed in the distance, converging on a scene already documented, already undeniable. Sango turned to Alicia. This won't end tonight, he said. She nodded. I know. The dog sat at her side, steady, present. As the gates closed and the city reacted, one question hung unanswered in the air. When the fallout came, would any of them survive it? Morning came quietly. Not with sirens or gunfire or the sharp crack of consequence, but with light. Pale and deliberate, it spilled over the estate walls and softened the edges of a place once designed only to intimidate. The screens in the security room replayed the same images on loop, a badge stripped of authority, a confession broadcast too widely to erase, a system forced to watch itself fail. The dog lay in the courtyard, stretched out on the stone as if it had always belonged there. No pacing. No tension wound tight beneath its skin. Just breath. Slow. Even. Alive in a way it hadn't been before. He lifted his head only when Alicia moved, eyes tracking her with calm recognition. Not vigilance. Trust. Handlers kept their distance now, not because they were afraid, but because they understood something had changed. The animal wasn't broken. It hadn't been subdued or dominated. It had been heard. And that made all the difference. Alicia walked through the estate without lowering her eyes. Staff looked up when she passed. Some nodded. Some stepped aside. No one mistook her for furniture anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was accounted for. In a world that measured worth by fear, she had rewritten the math. Sangha watched from the balcony above. He looked the same to outsiders, composed, immaculate, untouchable, but something fundamental had shifted. He no longer needed silence to prove power. He no longer relied on the dog as a threat. Control had given way to clarity. Respect had replaced intimidation. The city would adjust. It always did. Alicia stopped at the edge of the courtyard. The dog rose at once. She didn't gesture. Didn't raise her voice. She spoke the word one last time, not as a test, not as a command, but as a shared understanding forged in pressure and patience. The dog came to her and sat. Perfectly still. Perfectly calm. Around them, the world held steady. This was the new order. Not chaos restrained by violence, but power anchored by awareness. A boss who ruled with foresight. A woman who refused to disappear. An animal no longer weaponized but whole. Everyone thought the dog obeyed power. They were wrong. He obeyed understanding. Some stories aren't about taming monsters. They're about learning who was never one to begin with. And once you see that difference, you never look at power the same way again.